and 3 new firefighter positions. The Health and Human Services budget is up 19%. A Board of Health nurse position has been added, as well as increased funding for veteran services staffing to meet a growing demand for support. Employee benefits and insurance is up 7.55%, primarily due to increases in health insurance premiums and Middlesex County retirement plan costs. Regional Technical Vocational School budget is up 36% due to increased enrollment. On the positive side, debt service is down $1 million. Last year, we had a large increase in debt service due to the completion of the DPW at Marathon School. The drop will continue in future years, notwithstanding the approval of major new capital projects. Sewer enterprise budget is down 10.7% due to lower debt service costs and retirement of debt. Next slide. The major takeaway from this slide is that the debt service is 9.7% of the general fund budget. Last year, debt service was 11.4%. The school department has the largest proportion of the budget, accounting for 55.1% of the total budget. Employee benefits and insurance is 13.2%. Reserve and trust fund highlights. This year's budget sets aside $400,000 for OPEB, or other post-employment benefits. This is about half the $851,000 figure specified in the OPEB actuarial valuation report. By not funding per the actuarial report, we are not on track to eliminate the town's unfunded $28 million liability, and we continue to kick the can down the road to our future Hopkinton taxpayers. But because of the tight budget, our OPEB contribution proposed borrowing articles. All but 2 of the borrowing articles will be made inside of the levy limit. Proposed borrowings that will be debt exclusions include the fire department ladder truck and the proposed municipal parking. These 2 items will require an additional vote and approval on the ballot, with voting to be held on May 20th. Other capital articles, including pay-as-you-go capital expenses using $1,358,121 from free cash. Such capital items include scheduled replacement of DPW trucks, police cruisers, and district-wide facility improvements. The Appropriation Committee continues to monitor the town's debt levels, taking into account the ability to pay for these projects. Total general fund debt for fiscal year 2020 is 7.9% of the total general fund expenditures. Next slide. Current and projected debt service. This slide shows the current and projected debt service. Each bar shows the actual general fund debt plus impact for debt articles in the fiscal year 20 budget. You can see the impact to debt service due to the library, DPW, and Marathon School projects from fiscal year 17 through 19. With the initial borrowing of these projects behind us, the debt service tails off in future years. The debt service for the high school ends in 2022. However, the MSBA reimbursement for the high school will also end in 2022. Since the reimbursement is nearly identical to the debt service in these last 2 years of payment, the chart has been modified to present net of the MSBA reimbursement. This is why the decrease is gradual. It is a true representation of the decrease in debt service over time. Next. The next graph is similar to the previous debt service chart, but shows forecasted debt going out to 2045. There will be increased debt drop-off starting in 2025 through 2035. Next slide. Tax impact. For the average single-family home valued at $599,000, the projected tax levy for fiscal year 2020 will be $260, or a 2.5% increase over last year's tax. The total change in tax levy is $3,708,457, or 5.4%. Subtract the estimated $2 million new growth, and the levy to existing taxpayers is $1,708,457, or 2.5%. It is important to understand that this is the average increase. Based on the change in assessed value of your home, the actual increase could be greater or less than 2.5%. Next slide. Excess levy. The next slide shows Hopkinton's excess or unused levy capacity. People often ask how much of a tax levy the town can send to taxpayers without an operational override. Here's how it is calculated. The unused capacity from fiscal year 2019 is used as the base for calculating the 2020 excess capacity. For 2020, from the $1,952,285 base, we add allowable levy for Prop 2.5%, Prop 2.5. This year's new growth is estimated to be $2 million. New growth estimates are lower this year due to lower construction estimates at Legacy Farms. Back in fiscal year 2018, new growth was $2.7 million. Last year was $2.2 million. This year's $2 million projection shows a decreasing trend regarding new growth. We can also add additional debt service that was excluded debt. In this budget, excluded debt is $673,212 lower than last year, so it is subtracted in the calculation. For the 2020 budget, our new allowable tax levy increase is $4,889,023. When you subtract the $3.7 million levy increase from the 2020 budget, you get the new excess levy capacity of about $1.18 million for next year's budget. Finally, I would like to mention that the Appropriation Committee has generated another comprehensive report this year. It is available online, or there's a handout out in the auditorium hallway. This report gives details for each department's budget, including the main drivers for requested increases. I hope everyone here has seen it or references it as we go through the financial articles. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Would the school committee like to make its presentation at this time? While the school committee is preparing, it appears that there are some registered voters on stage right in the front in the area that's reserved for town employees. If you're a registered voter in town meeting, you should move to a part of the hall where registered voters are supposed to be. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Carol Kavanaugh. I'm the superintendent of the Hopkinton Public Schools, and with me tonight is Mrs. Susan Rothermick, who is the finance director, and we are very pleased to present the Hopkinton Public Schools FY20 budget. And we want to thank the Appropriation Committee as well as the Board of Selectmen for their ongoing support in our budget creation this year. So in terms of creating our budget, our major goals were to maintain Hopkinton's exceptional academic and extracurricular programs, to offer curriculum and instruction that meets the needs of all learners, to add teachers and support staff to accommodate the increases in student population, and we will address that in this presentation, to ensure that our school facilities support maximal growth for all children, to support student safety measures, to continue to build our technology programming, and to support the principal's school improvement plans. Hopkinton, as you know, has maintained very high status across the Commonwealth. This year, U.S. News & World Report has ranked Hopkinton 6th, Hopkinton High School. So we had some challenges along the way. Once we got going, we realized that the increases in enrollment were going to require a whole lot more funding for us for next year, and most of that funding you'll see in these slides comes in the way of personnel. We have our out-of-district transportation for special education students is done through the ACCEPT Collaborative, one of the big budget movers in ACCEPT. And we had a lot of unanticipated personnel needs, and that came about because of increased enrollment. You can see that we had to add 20.3 positions, and that resulted in an increase of $678,528 that was unbudgeted in FY19. So people is about the number because kids don't just have a 9th grade teacher or a 2nd grade teacher. They have PE teachers, art teachers, special education teachers, English language learner teachers, OT, PT, and all of those different support services and specialists. So when we built the FY20 budget, we built it on that number you see at the bottom of the screen next year. At this point in time, I think that my slide, it tells you that we already have 32 kids who are not captured in this number. That number is actually up to 39 as of this point. It was different on April 25th when we put these slides together. So we felt on April 25th that we had about 34 spaces left in those 103. Currently, we have 27 spaces left, and last year we had over 100 students join our schools in the summertime. So we feel like enrollment is something that's impacting our budget, and we are uncertain whether or not we will be in front of town meeting again looking for additional money before the close of the FY20 budget. You can see how those students are distributed. When we look at those numbers, that slide tells you that right now we have 217 students enrolled in kindergarten. It's 220. Last year, we estimated we would have 204 students enrolled in kindergarten. We had 264 students enrolled in kindergarten. What we're seeing are trends where kids are here for the K-12 experience, so heavy volume in kindergarten. We see a lot of enrollment in grade 6, so maybe some people are just looking for the secondary experience, and then there are some folks who are just looking for the high school experience, so we had increased enrollment in grades 8 and 9 combined. So to indicate to you how we get these numbers, the number 103 came from NESDEC projections. They've been doing projections for our public schools for years. What you see on the slide behind me are all of the houses that are going to be prepared for occupancy by June of 2019. That's what's in that middle column. And you may have difficulty reading that from so far away. But I use this slide to illustrate that we are constantly thinking about enrollment projections. If each of those 132 homes has, on average, only one student, we will have 132 new kids in the Hopkinton Public Schools next year. So let's talk a little bit about the way we built our budget. We start with a zero-based budget, which means that we have nothing on the table, and we ask the building principals and the directors of technology, curriculum, to come and tell us what they predict they are going to need based on enrollment and based on programming in the Hopkinton Public Schools. When they first came to us this year, they came with a 9.9% request increase over the FY19 budget. Our budget guidance from the Board of Selectmen was at 6.5, and we tried very hard to stay within those parameters. We felt like 6.5 was a very generous offering on the part of the Board of Selectmen, and it recognized our increased enrollment. And still, it is difficult to keep our schools going when we have so many new students arriving all of the time. What you can see on that slide are some of the positions that were requested and that we eliminated in those incipient stages of budget creation, which was able to get us down to 6.3% increase, and which was approved by the Board of Selectmen and the Appropriation Committee. And so this slide here, we typically put in there because it shows you your per pupil expenditure. These are the the 2017 per pupil expenditures. The 2018 per pupil expenditures are not yet available. Those other communities were chosen just because they are ones with whom we sometimes compete. They are ones that are similar to us in size and demography. And you can take a look that we are ranked 24th in terms of per pupil expenditure. $14,557 per pupil is actually a very conservative per pupil expenditure in Massachusetts. And so the point of this slide is to say that Hopkinton school children get a whole lot, I think, on a very conservative per pupil expenditure. Some other very quick highlights in the way the Hopkinton Public Schools are performing. If you take a look at this, these are MCAS rankings, and these are for grades 3 to 8. It's sort of difficult to have a lot of metrics on other grade levels. Grades 3 and 5 in ELA and grades 6, 7, 8 in math are performing in the top 5% in the state. So anything with that green color is 95th or better. White is in the 90th to 94th percentile. And anything that's in peach is in the 80th to 89th percentile. And those are places where, in the budget creation, we did actually apply funds to sort of raise those scores and build those programs. Hopkinton High School, I'll just read through these very quickly. The high school is ranked 18th statewide in average reading and math SAT scores. 89% of Hopkinton High School students earned a passing score, either a 3, 4, or 5, on over 1,100 advanced placement tests taken. The high school had 100% of its students earn proficient or advanced on the ELA MCAS in 2018. Not one student ranked needs improvement or failing on that exam. 97% of its students earned proficient or advanced in mathematics in 2018. Hopkinton High School was one of 4 high schools in Massachusetts named by the Commissioner of Education as a school of recognition. And Boston Magazine ranks Hopkinton High School in the top 20% among the best public school districts in Massachusetts in 2017. So Hopkinton Public Schools have an awful lot to celebrate, and I thank you as town meeting attendees and voters tonight for supporting our budget. And now I'll have Mrs. Rothmick talk a little bit about the budget itself.
Thank you. So as you can see from this slide, as we said, we brought the budget in at 6.63, which was a little bit over the 6.5 guidance. I apologize if I'm not talking close enough. This slide really just shows that in a school district, basically, we are a service industry. So 80% of our budget is personnel. So whenever we are building our budget and we need to either address student need or actually make reductions, it typically comes in the line of personnel. Our expenses are tied to contracts, utilities, and there's much less movement in that line item. So as you can see, the personnel increases that we added in fiscal 19 to address that additional student enrollment, these are personnel that are also then carried over into the FY20 operating budget. The new requests for FY20 to address not only ones that we could not address in terms of enrollment, but also that additional increase in personnel or student enrollment. These are the personnel increases that were requested for FY20. And when we're looking at a budget, we're always looking for the buildings to be creative. So if you have a need, then we're also going to ask for you to look at the best configuration and also suggest some reductions. So these are some of the reductions that were made, knowing that we need to keep in line with our finite revenues that the town has. This next slide just really puts those last slides, different visual to kind of sum up everything that has happened both in 19 and 20 that is carried on into the FY20 budget. And then the last slide looks at those expense changes. As I said, most of our changes are in personnel. You can see that most of these changes in expenses are much lower. Central office, what you have there is a contractual increase for the bus contract needed to be hired in FY19. So this is really, that's half of that increase. So you can see those are the increases for the expenses. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. $92.7 million. Somebody must have a question.
Hello, I'm concerned about the price
name,
of...
name,
oh,
name
William
and address.
Simpson. 5.
Of their historical projections. And so the reason I ask, obviously, the performance of the schools is obviously very good. It's one of the reasons my wife and I moved here. Our kids aren't quite in the school yet, but they will be soon.
Depth project for us, and that's where they came up with the 103 students. But as a school department, we wanted to make sure that we were accurately or getting the best numbers that we could. I mean,